Oh, yeah, all rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending.
Eddie Hecker going over the top. Lassiter to the end zone. This fires downfield. Touchdown, Chase Roberts.
2-0 BYU football, 2 wins, 2 games, and now 2 games worthy of film to look at, Jarom, to determine what the heck this BYU football team is.
Yeah.
How much do we really know? And frankly, I think we're still all unsure about a number of aspects, but we're calling this the inception game, Jarom, okay?
Yeah.
We're going to play the inception game
Yep.
today to see what we really feel like we know about BYU. What is reality, okay? You know, when you spin the top, what actually, like, does the
was
spin
it wobbling
fall
or not?
over,
Yeah.
or does it just spin forever? And what is essentially in dreamland,
Yeah.
okay?
And how far down are we?
How
Like,
many
we on the beach?
How many levels do you have to go to reach certain things that BYU fans believe?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, 10-win season. That's probably 3 levels down right now.
Anyone saying that?
Okay, that's
What?
probably 3 levels down.
Get out of here.
Okay, so what is reality and what's a dream for BYU football, beginning with this? A statement, you tell me.
Yep.
BYU's offense is back on track.
It's hard to know because of the opponents. Like, I think we don't know whether that's real or not. Like, what we saw against SUU, it's hard to imagine that that's exactly how BYU is going to perform against, say, Arkansas or Kansas or Cincinnati or Texas or whatever. Certainly, that is the worst opponent on the schedule for BYU. I did love, however, the explosive nature of BYU's offense, especially in the pass game, as you guys mentioned yesterday. And if you watched Coordinator's Corner, Aaron Roderick was super obvious about, hey, they put 2 safeties within 7 yards of the box. We're going to throw over the top of them. We're not going to run into that. They were begging us to pass, and we did. And BYU did it really well. Now, you know, what will Arkansas bring defensively? They have a very opportunistic defense. They've only allowed a few points. Like BYU, it's like 8.5 and 9 points allowed for both teams. It is a small number. But I trust that Aaron Roderick's going to figure it out. Because the last 2 years, BYU's put up 30-plus points, been explosive, been efficient. I believe that will continue to happen. They have an experienced quarterback, obviously in Keaton Slovis. Good to have Keanu Hill back, caught the touchdown. Will we see Cody Epps? The hope is that he's good to go. It depends on how he feels. So hopefully he feels good enough, because in this game last year, Cody Epps was a baller. So too soon to say, yes, BYU is back on track. They are good to go. I don't know based on the competition. I need to see it for not just one game, but a couple of games.
People, we're in dreamland if we think automatically BYU's offense is back on track after one game against Southern Utah. You need more.
Yeah.
Like, we need to see more in actual games, and this is a real test in Fayetteville on Saturday. We will learn some things about what BYU really is in the game against Arkansas. For me to say BYU's offense is back on track, I have to see. I'm not looking at the number of total yards that BYU is rushing for. I am more concerned about yards per rush. BYU averaged 2 yards per rush against Southern Utah. They still tried to run 23 times, Jarom. Like, I need more than 2 yards per rush on average. I need like 3.5, maybe pushing 4 yards per rush, because in there, that
Against
tells me
SU or Arkansas?
Just
Anybody?
Over the course of the season.
SU, I would have liked 5 yards a carry.
Sure. But, like, I'm not going to be super picky because it hasn't been great against Sam Houston, it hasn't been great against SU. But, like, to say, like, oh, they're heading in the direction of getting back on track, I'm going to need, on average, at least 3.5 yards per rush. I don't care if they run 8 times all game. Let's say SU loaded the box and BYU threw the ball 60 times. Fine. But the 8 times you rush, give me at least 3.5 yards per carry, because that means somewhere in there, there's probably an explosive play. And BYU just has not had explosive plays in the run game. Like, outside of L.J. Martin late in the game against Sam Houston, and then a flash against Southern Utah for a moment.
The 17-yarder.
There hasn't been much explosion in the run game. So to be back on track, that has to happen. Doesn't matter how many times they decide to rush. Just give me a yards per rush average that's 3.5 going 4.
And on a 3rd or 4th and short, when you will predictably run, that is when a yard or 2 is okay, if you need a yard or 2. So success rate kind of factors into this as well, which is, what are you doing on certain downs, right? Not all downs are created equal. Now, second question, this one for you. BYU will rush for at least 100 yards against Arkansas. Dream or reality?
Right now, that feels like a dream. 112 yards against Sam Houston, 46 yards against Southern Utah. if Arkansas has any sense of logic and reason, they will look at what those two teams did against BYU to slow down their rushing attack and think, we should maybe try and do that. And then take our chances with what Arkansas is going to believe is a much more skilled secondary and pass defense than what Sam Houston and Southern Utah had. That is the X factor for me this week. Arkansas, I believe they will stack the box. Like, they're not going to give up a ton in the run game, and they will challenge BYU to throw against the best pass defense they have seen to this point in the season. Like, they have a good secondary.
And their secondary is legit. Dude.
Really
They're
good.
Really good. Yeah.
Okay, so this to me feels like a dream. I'm thinking that BYU is probably going to wind up somewhere between 60 to 85 yards rushing.
BYU typically loses those games. Most football teams lose those games that have that number. But BYU, I mean, if BYU can get into the 150-plus range, which is not a huge number, by the way.
Even over 100 to me would feel great against Arkansas.
Most teams not named like Washington State who just chuck it, they're trying to get 200 yards rushing in a game. The fact that Arkansas has only allowed 90 in 2 games and has 21 TFLs scares the crap out of me. Granted, Western Carolina, Kent State, but when you look
Similar
at BYU's
BYU.
offense, it is not the impressive competition. So both teams are untested here. Both defenses have fared well. But offensively, can BYU put up enough points in this one? And which brings us to the next question about the defense.
All right, next statement. Is there any reality in today's conversation? We will see. Is this a realistic statement? BYU's defense is a top 25 defense.
Well, right now, yeah. After you play Sam Houston and Southern Utah, yeah. Will it be at the end of the season? We certainly hope so. To pick your stat though, like I would, if I could pick one stat, it'd be obviously points per game or points allowed per possession or whatnot. Right now, BYU, and you'll hear more about this in your conversation with Max Tooley. Right now, statistically, BYU is looking great. But 1 sack is not good. 4 interceptions is very good. 1 fumble recovery. It was on special teams. Hey, that's great. I like those 5 takeaways a lot. BYU's not creating as much havoc as I think they wanted. I was hoping they would have created a lot more havoc.
10 tackles for loss helps.
Yeah, and that's not a huge number through 2 games and against that competition. So I do fear that BYU's not going to get the pressure on KJ Jefferson that they perhaps need. / it's hard to bring that guy down. He's a big fella. What is he, 6'3", 246, I think, or something? He might be 6'4". This is a big dude. So can the BYU defense give BYU a chance? More on that in a moment. But top 25, yeah, right now. Now you play 10 P5s in a row.
I was asking at the beginning of the season, if by the end of the year BYU's defense can be like top half of college football, then they'll be in great position to win at least 6 games and go to a bowl game.
Yeah.
I believe they will be a top half of college football teams, top 65 defense.
In what are you saying?
Total defense, points
yards allowed?
Yeah, okay. Points allowed, yards allowed. Like when you look at whatever comprehensive metric you choose to believe is the best, whether
SP+.
that's Bill Connolly's SP+. Or
EPA allowed.
Right? I like BYU's defense right now, and I think, they're going to face some really good offenses, but even so, I think they got some players, Jarom. I think they got some guys that are opportunistic and create turnovers. While the sacks have not been there, I believe BYU is a top 65 defense at the end of the season. Technically speaking, yes, they're a top 25 defense.
Yeah, right now, great.
I believe we will see the defense against Arkansas that's going to be more like somewhere between 55 and 65.
It's way better than it was last year. Like we still haven't seen kind of the top end. This defense has not been challenged. They certainly have a challenge the next 2
BYU's
weeks.
defense gave up 52 at home last year against Arkansas, and let us not forget, Arkansas was like on the 2-yard line and could have scored again if they wanted to make it 59-35.
It could have gone for 2 minutes.
They opted to kneel it out. Like, it was a sign of mercy from Sam Pittman in Arkansas. Yeah. Like, that made it even worse. Like, oh my gosh. This is embarrassing at home. Okay, defense knows this. They're not going to give up 52 to Arkansas.
No, that's not.
Can they keep Arkansas to 24 or fewer is the real question.
24 would be nice. Okay, finally, BYU will keep it within 1 score or win against Arkansas. Dream or reality? Talk to me, Hans Zimmer.
Rocket Sanders is not playing for Arkansas.
I know, right?
And I said to our producer, Colton Potter, yesterday, to me, that fact alone takes this line from 9.5 points down closer to like 6.5 or 7. I feel like he is that
good.
big of a difference maker. 15 carries, 175 yards last year against BYU, 2 touchdowns. Rocket Sanders not playing helps BYU immensely.
Yes.
Immensely. Like, it's worth 2.5 to 3 points to me in the odds makers line. So I believe this is reality, Jarom. I believe this feels like a game that's going to be a little bit like the Tennessee game. Might be a little low scoring, hard fought, ugly at times, some critical turnovers and creating some key junctures in the game. And frankly, I feel like whoever kind of has the ball last is going to win the game. Like, if Arkansas has the ball and they're up 3, like, BYU can't get it back, they can salt it away. Yeah. But I believe that BYU will be within 7 points when all is said and done, win or lose.
Love it.
Okay?
That's what you hope for on the road, SEC, against a team that took it to you at home last year.
Because of Rocket Sanders not playing.
What if I told you that BYU not having one Puka Nacua is the Rocket Sanders equivalent? Because last year Puka was 8, 141, and he had 2 scores, 1 rush, 1 pass. The fact that they see him on the Rams is good news if you're an Arkansas fan. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that guy's gone. Rocket Sanders not being in the game gives BYU a much better chance, obviously, than it would have. 1,400 yards last year. I mean, that's the best backfield in the SEC returning in terms of 5,000 all-purpose yards and 45 touchdowns. Like, are you kidding me?
A lot of people think this is a top 25 team. I mean, the 3 votes out. Or, sorry, 3 spots out of the current top 25.
Yeah, if they beat BYU, maybe they get in. The turnover battle is what I am staring at so hard. Arkansas under Sam Pittman, 4th year now, 14-0 when winning it. When they're even or negative, 7-17. Jay Hill in the defense can give BYU a chance in this game by being positive in the margin. Obviously, the offense has to not turn it over. They've done a great job. Just 1 turnover through the 2 games. Obviously, last year was different. It's a different defensive staff. BYU's got a much better shot in this game than I felt like even a week ago, frankly. Not because of how the Cougars have played. Well, on defense a little bit, but also because BYU's not turning it over a ton, and the fact that Rocket Sanders not playing. A.J. Green was good, but they literally relied on K.J. Jefferson to run the rock. BYU's got to play great in the secondary, and they have good corners and good safeties right now because they're probably going to have to put some pressure inside that box to spy on K.J. Jefferson. Linebackers got to bring it in this one.
How wild is it that in the 4 wins combined that BYU has against the SEC, 3 of those 4 wins were decided on the final play of the game? Game-winning kick against Mississippi State in 01. Kyle Van Noy, strip, sack, fumble, score, okay, to win at Ole Miss 14-13 in the inaugural game of independence. Then a double overtime win against Mississippi State 28-21 in LaVell Stadium. And then the Micah Miracle, followed by the Tyson Williams push to win in double OT at Tennessee.
And your point is true. In a 1-score game, they're all decided by the last play. Because if someone can score on that play, it's all. But you're right. Like the game-determining thing came to, wild. So if BYU wins, it's on the last play.
Just prepare yourself for just absolute mental breakdown moments.
This is a stressful
anxiety,
one.
stress.
Hey, welcome to P5 football, man. Like, every game's going to be stressful in some way.
Our question of the day, what do you feel like you know? Like, this is like reality. What is reality about BYU football through 2 games? At Jonathan Hoke on X says, I know BYU's defense plays a lot more aggressively compared to previous years. I know that BYU has a lot of depth at the wide receiver position.
Fact.
And I know that BYU has one of the best punters and gunners in the nation in Ryan Rico and Marcus McKenzie.
Why is that not the elite voice of the day? Because that is well stated.
Solid.
I thought that was great. Randy Christensen on Facebook. Not a lot, really. We know BYU has potential. We still haven't seen a good sample of playing against an established FBS school or on the road. We should start to learn a lot more this week. Certainly, this is the ramp-up that we kind of been hoping for, the warm-up, because BYU's had to go hard early in season typically, and you kind of get exposed, or maybe you get a big win, right? Now BYU gets the test. This is the biggest, second biggest road test of the season. Obviously, at Texas feels like the biggest right now. SEC, team that put it on you last year. Let's go. BYU's got a shot in this one. They got a better shot than I thought, even a couple days ago.
Hashtag BYUSN on X, Facebook, and Instagram to join the conversation.